What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald.
That one
Now,
pays the rent.
that one pays the rent. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can tell I'm not in my normal, bearings, my normal abode in South
That
Florida.
that modern art's not behind him.
Yeah, exactly. I am in Mobile, Alabama, the home of the 2024 Senior Bowl. I was gonna say
That's
I'm a little more optimistic and joyful about it than you, but I'll be out here this week for the Senior Bowl. Tons of draft prospects have made their way to Alabama for the week of practice, culminating in the game on Saturday. The Dolphins will have boots on the ground. I actually ran into a Dolphin scout on the way here. They will be well represented looking at some potential draft targets. I actually already got a story up on the Miami Herald website of 10 players to watch, keep a tab on over the next couple weeks, next couple months, as we make our way to the NFL draft in late April. This is just the latest, the next stop in the offseason for the Dolphins as they move from in-season mode to off-season mode. So we'll definitely have a ton of content for you this week. However, it's been a week since we had the podcast, since we recorded. We had a
actually
lot.
2 weeks, but because
Yeah,
we skipped last week. We
technically
took
2 weeks. Yeah, yeah. Took a
no,
little.
technically 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks. The
All right,
calendar,
but
man.
hey, I was gonna say the days just all mixed together nowadays. Now they
That's what happens in Mobile.
but
So,
we did have some big news since the last time we recorded the podcast. The news has already been out there. Dolphins and Vic Fangio parting ways after one season. A little bit of a shocker, kind of the first domino in what we all thought was going to be a very interesting offseason. Now, if you remember last year, he was the white whale. The Dolphins brought him in. They made him the highest paid defensive coordinator to replace Josh Boyer. And all accounts, I mean, he did a pretty good job with this unit. This was a unit that dealt with a lot of injuries, but they finished top 10 in yards allowed the first time since 2010. Again, despite a lot of injuries, we talked about it a couple weeks back. The Dolphins played their final game of the season in the wild card round against the Chiefs without five starting defenders, and another one, Angie Van Ginkel, who was, a de facto starter this year. So a lot of adversity for that group, but they still acquitted themselves pretty well when healthy in the first year of Vic Fangio's scheme. Nonetheless, he's out. If you read my story last week, I spoke to some people in the know, spoke to some sources who said, while he did do some good things with his scheme, there was a rigidity to the defense, excuse me, the defensive scheme. And some of the stuff was stuff that we had heard. We spoke to Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey, and they expressed the desire to shadow more often. And there just was a lack of kind of flexibility that I think frustrated a lot of people, a lot of players. I was told that, he didn't have the greatest relationships with a lot of guys. Um, Vic Fangio has moved on already very quickly, is now the Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator. And that was something that he was rumored to be interested in dating back to last year. I actually asked him at the end of OTAs in the spring, there was a ESPN report that if not for some tampering with Jonathan Gannon before he left the Eagles to go to the Cardinals, Vic Fangio may have been the defensive coordinator. And he said, that could be true, but I will neither confirm nor deny it. So, that a non-answer says a lot right there. Nonetheless, he is in Philadelphia. The Dolphins are currently searching for their, I guess, third defensive coordinator in as many years. We're going to talk about, maybe some of these names that have popped up and who we might want the Dolphins to hire, who we think the Dolphins should hire. But we're going to start with the Vic Fangio news. Like, was it the right move? Was it the wrong move? Um, I will say this. I think that it was very clear personality wise, like who the Dolphins were bringing in. I think that, the thing that stood out was that Vic Fangio's personality was a complete 180 from Mike McDaniel's personality. And I think that we all thought that was a positive in the sense of like you got a balance in personalities and tone and tenor, but there always seemed to be just something kind of like off with the marriage, so to speak. Like when he first got here, obviously, there were reports of does he even want to be here? Like I remember like when they first hired Fangio, there were reports saying that he was about to accept the job, and he goes on the record and tells, San Francisco-based reporter that he has a relationship with that no, I haven't signed anything yet. So you have like just kind of like that weird denial of whether he's actually going to be here. Throughout the season, like him kind of complaining more or less about the personnel and saying we don't have enough depth, we don't have enough depth, we need to get some guys in, kind of like not shots, but kind of making outward pleas to the general manager Chris Greer in the personnel department to bring in quote unquote his guys, I would say. And then go in season. While I think they did some great things with the scheme, but you had some of the best players on the team kind of, I don't want to say at odds, but kind of frustrated with some of the decisions that they were making. Specifically the shadowing. I think the shadowing thing was the one thing that frustrated fans and players alike, because we saw like what happened with them early in the season against Stephon Diggs when he goes for 120 and 3 touchdowns, mostly on Kader Kohu, and you have an All-Pro, Pro Bowl level cornerback in Xavier Howard who doesn't get the opportunity like to even shadow him or follow him or make any changes. And there was, again, I think that over the course of the season, there was a little bit of like a rigidity where it's like, all right, like you're kind of stuck in your ways. And Banjo kind of acknowledged that at times. Like when we asked him why he would do certain things, why do you call the plays from the coach's booth and give it to Anthony Campanile? And he's like, oh, that's how I've always done it. So that's how I'm gonna do it. Kind of talked about like, you can't teach a dog, old dog new tricks, kind of along those lines. Um, so I think that there's something to be said for the on-field impact that he had with with the scheme and implementing that in his first year. I will say I think the the success of the defense was a bit inflated, but if you look at them against some of the better competition this season, they didn't live up to those expectations. Whether it was Buffalo early in the season, the Baltimore game, some other games in the season, they I think the numbers were a bit skewed because of what they did against, some of the bad competition. But I will acknowledge that they were better at full strength. They were better than they were the previous season under Josh Boyer. But I think that when you have created a culture under Mike McDaniel um, kind of camaraderie and working together and collaboration.
Collaboration. Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say collaboration is the key word there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a big
yeah,
word around the league now, but yeah.
yeah, and it is open to ideas and open to guys giving their input, and then you have by all accounts a coach who was kind of dead set in his ways, wouldn't make adjustments based off of what his players preferred and were most comfortable with, and then you also kind of tie in the fact that maybe Miami wasn't his first choice, maybe he did want to be in Philadelphia. I'm okay with the decision. But McDaniel is really on the clock now, and we'll talk about it in a minute. He's got to hit this higher. He's got to get this higher right. Because you're facing some heat about the way the offense is going, but you can't have the defense regress to what it was under Boyer. Like you can't have it regress back to that. So he's got to get that and make sure that that defense side of the ball is locked down so he can take care of what he needs to do with the offense.
Yeah, the couple of things with Vic Fangio. The people can, these kids. You can almost hear some older fans. These players today, these kids today. Collaborative effort. In my day, coach said it, and that was it. Well, not necessarily. The better coaches have always. There have been some autocratic coaches, and there are some coaches who are like, okay, they're autocratic, but they're autocratic after they've listened to players and taken in the information and said, okay, wait a minute, this is what we're going to do. These days, players want to be listened to. There's a lot that's not in their. They feel it's not in their control during the game, and they want to be heard and feel like there's some things that are in their control. And especially if things aren't working well. They want to be heard, and you have to allow them to be heard. I think, unless you are, unless you're a truly, truly, unique defensive coordinator, defensive mind, or offensive mind, I think you have to listen to your players, because at the end of the day, they're the ones out there doing it. They have one of the things that John Madden used to say is, he said he liked his quarterbacks calling the game because they have to believe in the play.
Yeah.
The players have to believe in the play. The players have to believe in what you're doing. And, I don't think age is an excuse for rigidity. And look, I was saying this to my daughter the other day. I thought it yesterday, when people started discussing Dan Campbell's decisions during the NFC title game. But you can win being this is what I do, this is what we do, coach, and just this is how we do it. This is what we do. This is how I do it. You can win that way. But the best coaches that last long term and win over many, many years are the types that say, this is what I do, this is what we do, but in this situation, that's not called for. We're going to do that. Or I'm going to adjust to that. And because what I usually do, that's not called for right now. There's situations that don't call for it. This is that. So, Vic Fangio's had a long, successful career. I'm sure he'll, do well in Philadelphia. But not everybody's the right fit everywhere, and perhaps he wasn't just wasn't the right fit here. And so, but yeah, Mike McDaniel's looking at 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years. It's when you're only in your 3rd year in the NFL as a head coach, that's not setting yourself up for success, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, you want continuity with your coaching staff. You want to, build something continuously. But now again, he has to make sure. I don't want to say that like the hiring of Vic Fangio was like a failure or not, because I think that he did a lot of really good things with the scheme. But there's still something to be said for a lack of continuity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially on the defensive side of the ball now. So now he is. They are in the midst of a coach or a hiring search. Multiple names have surfaced. We're going to kind of go through this. I know, last week, I reported as well. As ESPN had reported that the Dolphins were interviewing former Los Angeles Chargers coach Brandon Staley for the job. Not too long afterward, it came out that they had also requested to interview Buffalo Bills linebackers coach Bobby Babich. I think I'm saying it correctly. And then today, just today on Monday, some additional names, including some in-house options have popped up. They're interviewing Anthony Campanile, the linebackers coach, who was also under consideration for the job last year. He's also interviewed with the Jets for their defensive coordinator opening. They're interviewing outside linebackers coach Ryan Slowick, who just finished his first season as the outside linebackers coach. I think maybe the most intriguing name to surface. They are reportedly, according to ESPN, set to interview former Bills defensive coordinator and former NFL head coach Leslie Frazier for it. So he's definitely. I guess I kind of want to start with Frazier because he is the most experienced and tenured of these options, 64 years old. He had spent the previous 6 years leading the Bills defense before kind of taking a sabbatical, took this past year off away from the game. I mean, he has a proven track record, 6 years
Right.
leading the Bills. They gave up the 3rd fewest points in the NFL. They were tied for the fewest points allowed. The Bills have been atop the league when it comes to defensive stats. And the Dolphins also interviewed Frazier for their head coaching job back in 2022 before Mike McDaniel got the job. So clearly view him in high regard. I guess after that, you have Brandon Staley as maybe the most experienced. Obviously he was kind of a fast riser through the coaching ranks. Just was recently fired in December as Chargers coach after 3 years. And he had a really good defense in 2020 with the Rams, notably led by Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. However, when he was in Los Angeles, his defenses just were never up to that standard. Really,
In the other locker room in Los Angeles.
yeah, with the Chargers. Yeah, for those 3 years, I mean, they were, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So I think that when you see that, you maybe do have some cause for pause. But again, maybe sometimes it's different in a coordinator role as opposed to a head coaching role. When you hear those names, who stands out to you? Anyone stand out in particular? And do you think it's important for the Dolphins to hire somebody with that coordinator experience as opposed to hiring a first time? Because keep in mind, um, Bills linebackers coach as well as Campanile and Slowick, they don't have NFL defensive coordinator experience, and it feels like for a team that is viewed as people view them as a potential championship contender, it feels like you'd almost prefer you'd be put yourself in best position to succeed hiring somebody that has done it. But what do you think about the current names that have surfaced?
Uh Boy, I mean, obviously Leslie Frazier's name jumps out at you for his accomplishments and that he's been around for a while. And uh, a new DC, someone new to the job at DC. Uh, you know, I don't know that you need that with a head coach who's still growing into the job in his probably in his third year. Even though I mean, he should be.
But I want to stop you real quick because I think that a lot of people said that the hiring of Fangio was going to be so instrumental because he was an experienced coach with head coaching experience. But when you look back, like, I mean, I don't know. I guess like I'm not in the walls of the office, the practice facility on a day-to-day basis. But like, did it really matter that much? Like,
Well, maybe it didn't, but maybe that's also his personality, and maybe that's the way his personality and Mike McDaniel's personality meshed or didn't mesh, and maybe you have a different mesh with a Leslie Frazier. I don't know. That's there's a there's a lot of variables, as we all know, that go into these relationships. That so that's why you do interviews, and that's why people talk to other people. And the the Brandon Staley one is kind of interesting. I don't want to completely discount anything that happens while somebody's with the Chargers, but my goodness, that franchise just seems to have such bad juju around it that you know, like I don't know. They get Justin Herbert, who's a hell of a quarterback, and I just think yeah, he's going to do some young quarterback things because he's a young quarterback. But man, I just get I. It's amazing to me that they're so many years you look at their lineup and you go, okay, that should be a winning team, that should be a playoff team, and they're just not.
And with the Chargers, like they had, I mean, I think by the end of his tenure, we had kind of come back around, and I think that when he first started, they invested a lot of money into the defense. Like they had Bosa and Khalil Mack
Yeah,
and
correct.
Derwin James, and then they made a big move in free agency for JC Jackson. So they had some big names, but it never came around. And I think that by the end of the tenure, they had some injuries, but I think by the end of his tenure, we are like, maybe we kind of overrated the talent, but to be bottom 10 in like all major defensive metrics, like
Yeah,
that was
that's
just that was a real shock. Like they
I
never, and he called the plays too, so it wasn't like he
yeah.
could kind of put the blame on somebody else. Like he was the one,
I would
with the
I
ingredients
would
and
love.
making the dish.
Well, obviously in the interview process, that's going to be the first question:
Like
is
what happened?
what
Yeah,
happened there? What
yeah.
happened there? What was your role in it? Um, maybe maybe he needs to be, maybe he needs to step back and be in a defensive coordinator role only, to where, instead of a head coaching role where you're worried about, 16,000 other different things other than just that.
But I will say that even usually, like a lot of times with head coaches, like when it doesn't pan out, like if they have if they have an expertise on one side of the ball, it's usually the other. Like it's like when you're usually the defensive coach, it's like the offense is what gets them fired, not like their specialty, which is why it's just
Right.
it's why it's so weird, like why they were that. Like it'd be different if they were like 18th, 16th, 14th. They were kind of like a middling, average, mediocre, but they were like routinely year in, year out one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So that's definitely something that he'll have to explain.
Like I said, it's the Chargers. There's a lot that happens there that just seems like year after year after year. It seems like it shouldn't happen there. They always that team is consistently looks better than they are, and you can't figure out why the heck they're not a better team and a better franchise. I know, but that'll be one for his explanation.
I was gonna say one last thing on Staley is I will say he does. So he does have a relationship with McDaniel. I believe they share an agent, and they're part of this QB collective group of head coaches. There's actually a clip out there where McDaniel was talking about Staley and kind of praised him, and he's like, Brandon Staley forces you to invent new stuff left and right because he's just that creative. Again, he also coached Jalen Ramsey back in 2020 with the Rams, and Ramsey was very complimentary of him. He said at that time, he said he's the best defensive coordinator I've ever had. He does a great job of putting guys in position to succeed. And I don't want to speak for Ramsey, but not long after the news broke that the Dolphins would be interviewing Staley, Ramsey actually put a tweet out kind of saying, like situations matter. I've seen guys go to places that were supposed to be great situations and not succeed, and then go to places that were supposed to be bad situations and somehow succeed. And he's like, everyone, situations really matter. So I'm not saying that it was, right connected to Staley, but you can kind of connect the dots right after that news came out. It seemed like he would have some supporters in the business. I mean, in the building. He also coached Bradley Chubb when he was in Denver, and he was coaching outside linebacker. So there is a lot of continuity. Ronaldo Hill, who was his defensive coordinator with the Chargers before he came to join Vic Fangio, he's still on staff as the passing game coordinator. So there's a lot of things kind of working in Staley's favor if the Dolphins do want to go that route, and they would be able to kind of retain the scheme. Like you wouldn't have to rip everything up, start from ground zero. You'd be able to kind of just step in and maybe get a more newer and fresher perspective, and kind of version of that scheme.
Yeah, I as for I don't think you can go with, however, I don't think you can go with a first time guy. It doesn't feel like
it wouldn't inspire confidence publicly to fans. I don't think so. But you'd have to be very certain. Like
I don't, fan response is fan response. You know what? You make your moves. If you're a GM or coach, you make the best moves you make, and the fans will. If it succeeds, the fans will go along with you. If it doesn't, the fans will pee on you. You cannot. If you make any decision based on your fans, you're going to be out of a job soon. That's so. But I don't think you can go with that newer. If you're trying to go make that next step, I don't think a first-time guy it might work, but I don't think you want that uncertainty if is this going to work?
Yeah.
You don't want that. Forget the fan base. You don't want that in the locker room and in the building.
Yeah, I mean, but I think what the Dolphins need most of all is they need somebody who is willing to be fluid, as it pertains to scheme, personnel, and week-to-week game plan. They need somebody. Like I saw this stat from ESPN on Twitter last week, and it said that the Dolphins were 31st in percentage of snaps in which they allowed their cornerbacks to play press coverage. So it was like 4%. So 4% of the time the Dolphins cornerbacks were in press coverage. And you got to think, like I saw that. I'm like, the Dolphins had a defense with Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey. And granted, they weren't on the field the entirety of the season, but they played about 8, 9, 10 games, 11 games together.
That many?
I mean,
when did Ramsey came in?
Ramsey came back in week 8. Xavier Howard was out for that game, so they played week 9. So week 9 to week 17, I think X makes the game. So like about half the season, but still half the seasons. You have about half a season's worth of snaps.
Right.
Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard, and even so, I mean, at some point you had X or Ramsey on the field, and you were only
you had
impressed,
one.
yeah, and you were only in press coverage 4% of the time, and I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like I understand the scheme is the scheme, but I think you can again, like X even said it himself at times throughout the year. He's like, yeah, this is a little different, but when push comes to shove, I'm gonna go back to what I feel comfortable and know how to do. I think they would be well served getting somebody who has his scheme in place, but can also morph it and mix it with what his guys do best, and adjust on a week to week basis based off game plan and what he's seeing out there. I mean, at first I was like, I didn't know how to feel about the Staley interview because again, it's hard to justify hiring somebody who had that much defensive talent and wasn't able to shake. And I have to keep in mind, and I keep on thinking that I'm not sure if the Dolphins defense is going to be the Dolphins defense that is on the field for week 1 of the 2024 season. I don't know if it's going to be as talented as it was, this past season. Because you have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips coming back from injuries, from severe injuries. They're going to be brought along slowly. You have guys like Christian Wilkins and Angie Van Ginkel and Deshaun Elliott who are free agents. You have a guy like Xavier Howard who there's some speculation that he might not be around. So I need somebody who might be able to. You might have to work, make do more with less. I think Frazier would be a great hire. I think the one thing that stood out to me from his time in Buffalo was that he kind of seemed like he got kind of like strong armed and pushed out the door in terms of Sean McDermott taking over the defensive play calls and wanted to do what he wanted to do. So I think that there was a little bit of a power struggle with what he saw for the defense and what Frazier wanted to do. But you have a proven track record right there.
Right.
And you have a guy where I think that the defense would probably be a little bit different. But I think that it wouldn't be like a complete philosophical change. And I think that you'd have somebody with that experience, a guy who has seen 20 years worth, well, 20 plus years worth of NFL offenses and defenses, and it's proven that he can produce a top ranked defense. I think that would be a great hire. And then it also kind of checked the box of having a guy who's experience and that head coaching experience. And he could really be the head coach of the defense, as Mike McDaniel likes to say.
Yeah, and that's the obvious plus with Leslie Frazier. And you also don't know, Fangio didn't seem to connect with the players for whatever reason. Leslie Frazier probably be better at that. Maybe better than that. I mean, was a former player.
Yeah.
Like I say, he's been around a long time, so he knows I think he's seen the evolution of player-coach relations, and he's up. I think he's probably able to adapt to it. I don't think his problems in Buffalo were with the players.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, most definitely. So a lot of Dolphins are casting a wide net in terms of hiring their next defensive coordinator. We'll have all the latest updates at the Miami Herald. So definitely stay locked as the Dolphins continue in that process. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, we are down to the final two, the Super Bowl participants after championship weekend or past couple of days. What can the Dolphins learn from the Final Four? And after watching those games, are the Dolphins closer or farther away from being in that spot in 2024? We're going to discuss that and more. Stay locked with us, and we'll be back soon. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast, talking all things Dolphins with David Neal. Now, in the first half, we break down all the news of the Dolphins parting ways, mutually parting ways with Vic Fangio last week, as well as updates on their defensive coordinator search. We're going to shift gears talk about some Dolphins adjacent news with the championship weekend.
Very adjacent.
Very adjacent with the Dolphins or the championship round over the weekend. The Chiefs knocking off the Ravens as underdogs on the road to advance to their fourth Super Bowl in 5 years. And then on the NFC side, the San Francisco 49ers coming back at home to beat the Lions in advance to their second Super Bowl in 5 years. It sets up a rematch of Super Bowl, which was at Hard Rock 5 years ago, which saw the Chiefs win their first Super Bowl in the Patrick Mahomes era. But we're gonna kind of keep it to the championship round, what we saw from that, and kind of what the Dolphins can take from that. Because at least on the AFC side, you had two of those were we can say those were two of the best teams in the AFC. Obviously, the Chiefs showed kind of their championship medal in that game, especially on defense. And these were two teams. Well, again, the Dolphins were knocked out by the Chiefs, and they also lost early in the regular season. They obviously faced Baltimore in Week 17 and were blown out. So these were two teams that the Dolphins had seen up close, and now they were watching kind of fight for the AFC title. And I was curious kind of what you took from that, as well as the NFC game when it comes to the Dolphins, what those games kind of showed the Dolphins need in order to get over the hump and kind of advance to that part of the postseason.
The Chiefs-Ravens game, I think showed the Dolphins are, despite their personnel, they're really not that close. It feels like they should be closer than they are defensively, because the Chiefs gave the Ravens a lot of problems, obviously. I mean, 17-10,
That was the Ravens' worst offensive game of the year.
Yeah.
It was Lamar's worst game of the year, too.
And they let them have nothing on time. They got Baltimore out of the running game, which
I think Baltimore got Baltimore out of the running game.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
and and I guess overall, also the Chiefs just have a way of handling adversity. They have something you can't replace. They have a bunch of guys. I mean, like, yes, they've had, they don't have Tyreek anymore. They, the running backs have changed, but there's about 15, 20 guys in that roster who have been through this whole thing with them. You go going all the way back to 2018 when they lost
like Chris
the
Jones
AFC title.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
And they, in these big games, like, when things happen to them in the regular season, you saw a lot more frustration, a lot more, a lot, and it seemed to break them for the night. When you saw a penalty pull back a sweet screen pass touchdown that really would have.
Yeah, the holding penalty had nothing to do with
the play, which also,
half.
which is also, that's an infuriating penalty because you're like, dude, you are barely supposed to touch him and let him through. What are you doing? Why are you hugging this man? And in the regular season, you saw different reactions so you saw a buildup of anger. And the next play, they got another penalty and got pushed back again. And I think they wound up getting this back in the field goal range, kicking the field goal.
They got a field goal before the halftime.
So there wasn't this, they still got something out of it. And it felt like in that game, it just felt like the whole mentality was different. There wasn't this, it was almost like they're like, okay, this isn't the time for that. We don't have time. We don't have time to throw helmets. We don't have time to be mad. We just need to deal with this situation right now. And let's get back and let's get something out of this. And just their whole they obviously didn't play a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination.
And they were scoreless in the second half.
Right, they were scoreless in the second half, and But again, when they needed a play at the end, it does help to have the best quarterback of your generation who's going to sit back there and throw off his back foot and still say, okay, Mecole Hardman, you've dropped everything but the car keys, for 4 months. I'm putting the game and our Super Bowl clinching hopes in your hands.
I think it was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but same thing. He dropped. He dropped a big catch in the Eagles game, and now he made this catch.
Whichever one you threw to, it wasn't Travis Kelce, who's also dropped a jackload of balls, right? The only guy, Rice, is the only one who hasn't, right? And recently, so I think there's something about mentality. And that's something that they have built through the years. So it's not something you can instill immediately. It's not something you can
kind of Patriots-esque. Like it's like you've been there, you have a composure about you, even when things don't go right, you find it as you stay calm.
But I think championship teams, though, in general, have that same mentality. I mean, we associated with the Patriots because they did it for 20 years. It felt over almost 2 generations of NFL players.
Mm-hmm.
But championship teams, that's always been something with them. That's part of having a championship medal. Being in big games. Hey, things aren't going well. Things aren't going great. But let's just no fussing and everything. Let's just keep playing and trying to do what we do best. And let's have this come out. We've seen that in Super Bowls. I just immediately flashed on the Cowboys Broncos Super Bowl a million years ago. It was not a well played game at all, and you had turnovers all over the place, fumbles, penalties, people doing things in scoring position. It was just bad, but the Cowboys kept it together, and then eventually got a big play, which was actually a drop. They called it a touchdown, but it was a whole thing of, okay, let's just keep playing. Let's not let the mistakes and everything get to us. Let's keep creating mistakes and trying to create mistakes on the other side. Let's just keep going. Championship teams have always been able to do that. And the Chiefs, as much as anybody else, have been able to do that, through huge deficits, back when their offense was really flying, 18 to 19, 20. Okay. Yeah. They're down by 20, whatever. Yeah. They felt whatever. They came back, they won big. And it just creates a mentality in these games. I don't know if there's anything personnel wise. I mean, other than you probably need to get, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, you do need, if you don't have a line that can play, that can, do a 4-minute drill or can pound out a yard when you need it, then
Casey won the trenches battle on both sides.
Right.
Like in that game, they won both. And I think that was maybe a surprise to a lot of people entering that game.
And you need to, if you don't have that unit, then you need to one way or another get that unit. You don't need to have the best one, but you need to have one that can do it.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson they learned in the wild card game anyway. Other than that, there's a lot of unique people on Kansas City.
Starting with 15.
Yeah. Starting with 15.
But
the coach is pretty unique too.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the greatest to ever do it. And again, that's just that experience and kind of callousness that you have, or the experience and tenor that he has. I would say it's funny watching that game, the AFC Championship game. It kind of reminded me of the Dolphins' first game against the Chiefs, in Germany, where the Chiefs get off to a hot start. They're putting points on the board. It looks like the defense is a little overmatched. They settle down. The Ravens and the Dolphins held the Chiefs scoreless in the second half. But it's just that Chiefs defense. I think that they were kind of maybe a little bit underrated throughout the year. But I mean, they were kind of the second best in terms of points allowed. They were the second best defense in the NFL. And you saw them win the battle in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I will say something that stood out to me in both these games, and kind of sticking with the AFC Championship game, is the impact of coaching. I think is still maybe a little bit overlooked, especially in these high stakes games. A lot of times it's very cliche and very natural, just kind of boil it down to the quarterback. Quarterback didn't play well. They lost. I'm like, okay, yeah, like obviously he touches the ball every single game, but the impact of coaching, game plan, and adjustments. And I say that because you have very similar situations with the Ravens season-ending loss to the Chiefs and the Dolphins season-ending loss to the Chiefs, where I think that the mindset or like as the public outward mindset entering both of those games for the Dolphins and the Chiefs is that if they were going to have any chance in that game and their best shot at winning that game was to run the ball. And I think it's for kind of different reasons. I mean, the Chiefs' deep run defense hasn't been that great at all this year, but for the Dolphins, playing in, a quote unquote warm weather team, playing in inclement weather, frigid conditions, the poorest game in franchise history, the thought was if we're going to have any chance, we got to run the ball, we got to run it consistently. And the Dolphins just never got to that. And the same thing with the Ravens. The Ravens just never even tried. I think they had a season low in carries, only 6 for the running backs. So it was a game plan thing, and it was kind of like it was a game plan thing and a coaching thing where they didn't never made that adjustment, and you're almost playing into the Chiefs' hands. So I'll say that, in terms of, maybe not personnel, but like coaching really does matter. And I think
Yeah,
in that regard, sometimes, and I think that Mike McDaniel, I've said it before. I think that he'd be the first to tell you that there were a lot of play calls, there are a lot of decisions that he would like back. But it's still just his second year. I mean, he's still just a very, very young coach. And it takes time. Like it takes time. Like even for all the criticism that Baltimore is getting for, coming up short, being the number one seed, like it's really tough to win in the postseason. Like I think that we're almost kind of taking what the Chiefs are doing for granted, like to get,
because we just watched another team do it for like 20 years. That's the thing.
yeah, like it's really tough.
Yeah,
Like weird things happen in the playoffs. I'm thinking, I'm watching the game yesterday, and I'm like, Zay Flowers gets a 55-yard completion and then a taunting penalty that's like the only other big play they've gotten outside of their touchdown. And, a taunting penalty puts them back. And then 2 plays later, he's diving into the end zone for what would be, the score that's going to cut it to 3 points with an entire quarter to play. And all the momentum is going to go to Baltimore. And he gets the ball knocked out the goal line and the Chiefs recover. Like weird things happen in the playoffs. I think that, and I've said it all season, like, you not only have to be good to like make a run, but you gotta be lucky. Like injury
oh
luck,
yeah, yeah,
game luck, like weird things just happen in the game of football. Um, and I know that
yeah.
Dolphins fans probably don't want to hear that. But Tyreek Hill kind of alluded to it over the weekend, like, like we're building something, like they are building something. And I know that this was definitely a season of what ifs for the Dolphins because at points it did seem like everything was kind of coming together. But it's just really tough. Like it's like everything, a lot of things have to go your way in order to be the last of 32 teams standing or be the last two standing. And for the Dolphins, like there were definitely some personnel stuff that could have been better. The roster wasn't perfect. It definitely wasn't perfect after, you factor in a lot of the injuries that they dealt with. Um, but I would say that they're not. I don't think that my view kind of changed after watching those games. I don't think my view kind of changed. Obviously, you got to be kind of perfect to beat a team like the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Um, but I think that the pieces are in place. And I think the major question, and the question that we're going to discuss a lot more times over the course of the next several months, is the quarterback situation and whether you are good enough at quarterback to uh to get over the hump. And I think that with Tua, you've seen some flashes, but there are some legitimate questions. And that kind of takes me to like my second point with the NFC Championship game. Um, I honestly didn't watch that game as much because I was, working on, stuff for the week and getting ready to head out here. But I saw Brock Purdy, and he might be like he might have been the most polarizing player this season, honestly.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some people that say he's a game manager. And some people say that he's like the next apparent of Joe Montana and Tom Brady. It's like so it's just very extreme. But
Slow down.
for as many mistakes as I saw him make early in that game, I saw him make plenty of plays late in that game where he's making throws, he's evading pressure, He's getting out the pocket. He's scrambling. He's making plays. Like he's doing stuff that you don't see from a quote unquote game manager. Um, I think that there's a lot of similarities to him and to his game. They're playing in similar schemes. Um, you know, I keep on going back to Tua, and the question is, he's never going to, like I keep on saying, he's never going to be Lamar. He's never going to be Josh Allen. He's never going to be Patrick Mahomes in terms of the skill set. But can he continue to grow his game and improve in some areas that we're not accustomed to him seeing? Because I feel like you have to play in order to be to in order to be successful and to make deep runs in the postseason. I think you have to have a good mix of on structure play and off script ability. And I
Mhm.
think that we've seen for the Dolphins that they are great in structure. Tua can hit that 3-step drop, find one of his guys over the middle, and let it rip with his anticipation and accuracy. But like we said, when the play breaks down, when things aren't going his way, when the picture gets a little muddied, can he extend it for a little bit? I'm not saying you got to run around like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar
Right.
was doing, but hey, Purdy was making some plays. Like he
Right.
was spinning out of traffic, he was scrambling, he was making throws.
You
I'm not saying Tua has to do that all the time, but I do think that you do have to have a little bit of in structure. You have to have structure to your offense, and you have to have the ability to make things shake when things are out of structure. Because when you're playing, like you got to keep in mind, like these were like 3 of the 5 or probably 5 or 6 best defenses in the NFL. Like the 4 remaining teams, like the Ravens were number one, the Chiefs were number two, and the 49ers and Lions were like top 10. Like they were high up there. So it wasn't like, these were just like offensive juggernauts and slouches on defense. You do have to be able to kind of play, have a curveball, be able to
you
play when
gotta be
this ball isn't really rolling to them. I don't think the Dolphins show that up. There were times where they could run the ball and they could do some versatile things. But I think that when push came to shove and they played the best teams, the best competition, like there's the reason why they were 1-6 against playoff teams and they only scored 12 offensive points a game. I mean, because those teams got them off what they were comfortable from. And I think you have to look at McDaniel with the play calling, but then you also have to ask a very tough question this offseason, like how much better can Tua get? And is that ceiling something that can lead you to a championship game in a conference and to the Super Bowl ultimately? I don't know if I have that answer because I don't want to say I have a hard time saying Tua can't get any better. Obviously, this is all projection, but I have a hard time saying he can't get better when, to McDaniel's point, all we've seen him do is get better when he's been provided a system that accentuates his talents. He's been healthy. He's been able to be comfortable and feel comfortable leading that team. All he's done is get better. So it's hard for me to say, like, this is the best that he's ever going to get. Because even with Lamar Jackson, like, there were a lot of people that didn't think he was going to be this good of a passer in 2018 or even in 2019 when he had his playoff struggles. Um, and maybe that should be maybe that should be a cautionary, not cautionary tale, but kind of a teaching point too. Like it's tough. Like sometimes you have to go through your lumps, you have to go through your growing pains, and kind of learn from adversity and learn from failures, to get better. So
the
I think the Dolphins definitely have, a big offseason ahead of them. But I do like their foundation and their core. Um, I said it before, I'd love to see them beef up the offensive line and get that fixed so they can really, really be like that mauling team, especially on the run on the ground. But I think the pieces are in place. No, for sure.
Yeah, well, whenever you play the best team, best defenses, you're going to have an ability to improv because at some point they're going to stop. They're going to kind of screw up what you do, on script or on time or whatever. They're, unless you're Montana, Rice, and Taylor, guess what? They're gonna, they're gonna interrupt you, and even then, they're going to interrupt your timing. They're going to interrupt you. You're going to need to improv, and the Dolphins don't improv well. Improv doesn't always have to be, running around, extending the play for 5 seconds. Sometimes improv is okay. First read no, second read no, third read no. Let me check back. Okay, let me step out of the pocket. Do a little pocket shuffling to give myself an extra second or two to maybe go back to first read. there has to be some improv, and the Dolphins don't have that. They're script. It's script in the screenwriting sense, not in the Bill Walsh sense. And yeah, things funky things happen in the playoffs. You do every championship team, every single championship team has needed some form of luck along the way. There's some point in the season they go, yeah, we're lucky this didn't happen here, or we're even the 72 Dolphins, they had to play the AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh because that's the way it was back then. They didn't, you thought they would have been the hosted as the undefeated number one seed. They didn't. They go to Pittsburgh. It's 63 degrees in January. Terry Bradshaw was out for the better part of that game. I mean, you get every championship team, every single one has, gets a break somewhere, gets lucky. But the other thing is they get breaks, but they are in position to take advantage of those breaks. And they're constructed to take advantage of those breaks. The Dolphins have gaps that we've seen and we've discussed. I feel like there's still I feel like as we go into the offseason, if you ask me next year what's their top end, it still feels like divisional round. I'm not even sure it's conference championship game.
Would you say that because of the quarterback play in the AFC, or because of the roster construction?
I think that I'm talking teams.
Okay,
I'm talking this whole team. I don't like teams win championships. Okay, great. Yes, you need to have a quarterback that does what you need that quarterback to do, whether it's a game manager or whether it's being a transcendent creator. David Copperfield is quarterback guy. Whatever, you still need a whole team to win. I often said Joe Montana's got 4 Super Bowl rings. So does Ronnie Lott. That's not an accident. He's got the same 4. That there's a reason. It takes a team, and as a team, I don't see the Dolphins being, and it's not just because of the quarterback play. It's not just because I would take Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, over Tua. I would take Justin Herbert over Tua. The Chargers are not as good a team, and we're not as good a team this year as the Dolphins were. Do I think they had a better quarterback in a vacuum? Yeah, but Tua fits well what the Dolphins do. But this is an overall team thing that I'm saying. I look at them and I see divisional round. Could that change? Of course it can. Of course that can. That can change this offseason. Who knows the shuffling that's going to wind up going on. There's usually a surprise or two. Baltimore's not going to look exactly the same. Kansas City's not going to look exactly the same. The key parts of Kansas City probably going to still be there, but
15 still going to be there, and the head coach is still going to be there.
Right, they're probably a lot of them they're going to be the same, but it'll be interesting to see how everything is reshuffled. But right now, I think the Dolphins are, as a roster, as a team, a divisional round team, and can they win a Super Bowl with Tua? He still has to improve, but why wouldn't we expect that? Why do we make these snap judgments? Do we talk about how tough the quarterback position is to play? Well, why do we make these really snap judgments on quarterbacks after a relatively short amount of time?
It sells, man. It sells.
No, it's dumb. It really is.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean,
It's just
I agree. You even look at Jared Goff, who was kind of left for dead after he was traded from the Rams. The Rams pretty much were like, we don't want you. We don't think we can win without you. And a couple years later, I mean, he's playing in the NFC Championship game with the Detroit Lions. I think he played pretty well in that game. I mean,
and,
he gave them a
and
very good opportunity to win that game.
to the Rams credit, they were like, okay, we're ready to win a Super Bowl now. You're not.
Yeah.
And they traded him for Matt Stafford, and that all worked out. It kind of worked out for both sides. The Rams got their Super Bowl, and Detroit has gotten their best. Well, they've gotten a good quarterback for a while, and but again, is Matt Stafford? This is what I'm saying about the quarterback. Compare Matt Stafford as a quarterback to Jared Goff. Matt Stafford's a better quarterback than Jared Goff at any point in his career. Okay. The Lions got further with Jared Goff at quarterback. Why? Because
they had a better team.
The whole team was better.
Yeah, they beat them. They beat
them. But the whole team was better. The whole Lions team was better than any Lions team Matt Stafford was on. And Matt Stafford was throwing to Calvin Johnson a good chunk of the time. But again, the whole team, and so. But I think it's crazy the way we do these. Like the people who are talking about Lamar. Can Lamar ever do it? Oh my goodness, is Lamar? How old is he?
27.
Did he? Yeah, did he suddenly get an AARP envelope in the mail? I mean, what the hell? He's 27. I remember talking to Peyton Manning his 7th year when
I think he was 2-4 in the playoffs at this point as well.
Oh, he went 0 for the playoffs until 2003, until his 6th season, and then in 2004 he's having the first of his record-setting years, and there's always already the thought, hey, well, what, how, when are you getting to the Super Bowl? When are you getting to the Super Bowl? He was, he was in his 7th year, and it come to a franchise that, frankly, his first year wasn't very good. And, it took him time to grow. He's still, even as he's setting NFL records, he was still growing and still improving as a quarterback. And the team around him was still improving, which was a big, big point, was the team around him was also improving. And, 9th year was when they won it.
Yeah, finally. It takes time.
Drew Brees was he 2001 draft? So he was year 9 when they won it.
Yeah,
2006 when they went to the championship game. But his first few years, wasn't a lot going on in San Diego. That's why they picked Phillip Rivers in 2004, and then Brees had a really kick-ass year. And the Chargers got turned around, but again, they got the team going. And so the Dolphins' problems extend beyond Tua. Does he need to improve for them to be a championship team? Yeah. But they have other problems that they need to address before they can, really sit at the table in, December.
Yeah, I think
sit at the big table. They had one of those satellite tables right now.
Yeah, I think Chris Greer kind of spoke to that in the end of season news conference, but he was asked, 5 years after, kind of the tank season. That wasn't how it was phrased, but after the rebuild season, is this a success or a failure to not have any playoff wins? And he said, it's kind of tough. Because this is the second year of Mike McDaniel. I think that ideally, when you strip down the roster and kind of start to rebuild like the Dolphins did 5 years ago, you would hope that you're definitely competing for championships at this point. But he noted that this is the second year in the Mike McDaniel era. It's really like the second year for Tua in this scheme, and you did see the growth. So they're building something, and I keep on saying I think that the foundation and the core is there. But yeah, it is. There needs to be accountability, and there needs to be a kind of urgency to capitalize on some of the talent that they have, and that's what this offseason will be for. So we'll see if they're able to do that. Again, it starts at, this week at the Senior Bowl, and then at the Combine, and then obviously we'll have free agency and a bevy of moves that the team will make in order to reshape, inform, and build a roster that can compete and be in the mix come the championship round. So we'll see how they do. Obviously, a very long offseason ahead of us. Will be there throughout the entirety of it, guiding you through all the Dolphins moves. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. Where thank you guys as always for tuning in. Reminder to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, and comment. Again, I'm in Mobile, Alabama this week for the Senior Bowl, so I'll have a ton of updates starting tomorrow on some players to watch, updates. We got a couple guys down here, so definitely we'll catch up with them and see how they're doing as they get ready to transition from college to the pros. We'll be back next week to recap another week of can't see Dolphins football, but we might have some updates on the defense coordinator search,
Okay.
some other developments. We'll be there all throughout the week, and we'll come back and we'll break it down for you guys. You got anything? Any lasting words, David?
Yeah. Get some barbecue up in Mobile, man.
I will. I've got some.
Get some good eating.
I will. I got some spots bookmarked, so I will definitely be indulging. And I'll enjoy it.
Don't have the chitlins though before you got.
No chitlins. You're not a fan of chitlins?
No, I am a fan of chitlins. I just know don't have those before you work because
I got you. I got you. I heard you there. We'll be back next week to talk more Dolphins. But until then, you guys take care. See ya.